One Piece chapter 1032. Now, there was a lot going on in this chapter, specifically in the beginning section pertaining to most of the encounters that are currently taking place close to the live floor, because now it seems like the majority of the moving parts are coming together in a single place, and it would also seem that Marco and Izo are heading into that turmoil as well. Now, this chapter also consisted of Zoro versus King, and here we actually learned some very interesting things about King and his body, perhaps relating to his devil fruit ability or the traits of the Lunarian race. And I've got to say that Zoro is really having a hard time against this guy, to the point where Zoro makes a comment that King hasn't really taken any damage so far. So again, King, we're slowly but surely getting to the point where we're going to get that reveal of what the Lunarians are and how Zoro can defeat him. But before we keep going, I would appreciate it if you drop that like on this video and hit the bell if you want to get notified for future content. Now, let's start with Zoro versus King. Now, I've got to say that I am really impressed with what King has shown us so far with his abilities. Here we come to find out that there's even more to his body than what we knew, and I'm not sure if this is relating to either his Pterodactyl devil fruit or is this relating to the Lunarian race. We don't know for sure. Now, based on Zoro's words here and the context of the situation, it would seem that this could be a trait of the Lunarians, where they're not only able to produce fire, but they can morph their bodies in different ways. Or maybe it's because of the suit that he has on. We're not sure, because in this chapter, King literally morphed his head into like a spring and then shot out like a sort of beam attack, which was probably one of the weirdest part of this chapter, because it didn't seem like something I would see from King. But I guess Oda doesn't really shy away from giving a right hand some sort of quirky type nature or fighting style, because that was really weird. But it's very clear at this point that King is using long range tactics against Zoro, because Zoro cannot fly, therefore it's not easy to have his attacks land, and that's what King is taking advantage of. So it's almost like a weird and tier tactic that King is using here, where he's trying to exhaust Zoro by attacking him from a distance, and that seems to be working so far, because Zoro does mention that even with all the attacks that King has taken, he hasn't done any damage at all to King. Of course, this falls in line with the nature of ancient Zoans. They're durable and are at the extremes when it comes to physicality. Interestingly enough, King does mention that he is above the level of ancient Zoans, which could be possibly hinting to the idea that he might be awakened. We're not sure. I'd also like to point out that we also get to see more of Zoro's analytical perspective, which we don't usually see from him that often, because for the most part, when it comes to Zoro's fights, it's usually a one trick thing, right? In which Zoro, for the most part, usually just brute forces his way in. But here we're seeing that King is really that much of an enemy that Zoro is resorting to analyzing what King actually is and his abilities, as he does mention that there's no way that he's going to win if he doesn't understand what King's abilities are and what race he's from. And on top of being very exhausted, it doesn't seem like King has really tapped into his abilities yet. We still haven't seen his hybrid form, and so Zoro is dealing with the unknown, which is why he's having a lot of problems. So it's going to be interesting into seeing how he's going to get out of this, because this seems to be heading towards the idea of him actually analyzing King and then taking action. So I do find it interesting that Zoro is taking a more analytical approach to things in this fight. Now, towards the end of the chapter, Zoro starts to hear a sound coming from a shamisen, and it would seem that because of that sound, Enma sort of reacted to it and has sort of gone berserk, because it seems to be forcing haki out of Zoro's body, just like when he initially got it. And to me, this seems to be signaling some sort of new power up for Zoro, given the context of the situation that he's in right now and backed up to a corner, and something's happening with Enma. Yeah, it does seem like something new is going to come out of this, at least in terms of power up for Zoro. And it seems to be Enma based as well. Now, we come to find out that the person playing the instrument turns out to be Hiyori, which we all kind of expected that she was on Onigashima, as she was most likely the individual who took care of the scabbards after Kaido defeated them. But it is interesting that Enma seems to be reacting to Hiyori. Obviously, being the daughter of Odin, there's obviously some sort of spiritual connection via haki or will or ambition, because we do know that this sword was passed down from Odin to Hiyori, and perhaps that's why this is happening. Enma has been a very huge topic in this whole arc, because it seems to be a very special sword, and we don't truly know why it is the way that it is, if that makes any sense. This just added more mystery to Enma. Now, I do also want to point out that we get to see Orochi here at the end as well, And if you guys remember correctly, Hiyori did mention that she did want to kill Orochi. So maybe that's what this is leading up to. Interestingly enough, we haven't seen Kyoshiro at all for a good amount of chapters now. And given that his story is kind of intertwined with Orochi and Hiyori, I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to show up here because he's been absent for quite a bit of chapters now. So maybe this is where he shows up. Now, moving back to the turmoil that is currently taking place in the castle. Again, as I mentioned before, it seems like everyone is converging at the same place. With Yamato, we see that she's obviously heading to the lower floor in order to stop the explosives from going off. And here we come to find out that one of the numbers actually turns out to be her friend, and she does ask him for help. The CP0, whilst chasing Brook and Robin, encountered the flame demon, which ultimately turned their attention towards Apoo. And it's funny because Apoo was taking pictures of them so that he could sell that info to Big News Morgans. I feel like Apoo is just playing free for all at this point. His role as of right now could be an ally or an enemy depending on the situation and if it benefits him or not. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up at the end of everything, right? Now, during the whole scuffle that he had with CP0, he does mention that he cannot use ornament haki, which is very interesting because you would think that most of these supernovas would have the ability to use the basics of haki, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Granted, we haven't seen Capone use haki at all, and Apoo seems to be following that same trend, so I guess it wasn't really a focus for them, as perhaps they relied more on their devil fruit ability and had no need to train their haki. We do also see X-drake and CP0 interact, and interestingly, it seems like they were aware of X-drake being a spy for the Marines, though they might not necessarily know that he's a part of SWORD. I feel like this definitely opens up the idea of the Marines and the world government potentially clashing in the future, because there seems to be a disconnect somewhere. But overall, very interesting turn of events with Apoo and X-drake taking on CP0. So far, I'm not really impressed with CP0's fighting abilities yet, but that could change if they actually take out Apoo and X-drake. Now, I do think that they are most likely stronger than Who's Who, as one of their goals was to take him out, but we'll see what happens moving forward. But with CP0 occupied here, it definitely gives Robin and Brook some time to escape. We do also know that Marco and Izo are heading towards them as well, but it seems like they're heading there to help stop the flame demon from destroying everything. Not sure if Marco's abilities plays a role here, but we do know that Marco's flames has an effect on fire, which was mentioned when he clashed against Big Mom earlier in the raid. The only person that we didn't really get to see in this chapter is Sanji versus Queen, so maybe the next coming chapters might be a focus on that battle, as it usually follows the trend of Sanji's battle resolving first, Zoro second, and finally Luffy last. Though Zoro and Sanji might finish their fights at the same time because their fights usually end in the same time frame, right? But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like on this video. Comment down below what you guys think. Subscribe for more One Piece content on this channel. Hit the bell if you want to get notified for future content. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ferrospace. But it is Pharaoh, guys, and I will see you folks later. Peace.